a senior marketing leader at AT&T, where he leads advertising strategy and campaigns while also driving AI adoption and change management across teams. He brings over 15 years of experience across brands like avocados from Mexico, leading large omni-channel campaigns. So Jorge, we are so excited to have you here. Welcome to the Digital Cut Podcast.
Thank you for having me. Anytime there's a conversation about marketing and AI, I've got to be a part of it. So
I love
happy to be
here. So you have been in marketing for, like I said, 15 plus years across brands like Budweiser and avocados from Mexico and now AT&T. So I'm curious, what's something about this AI moment that feels fundamentally different from every other big shift you've lived through?
I think the key word to maybe focus to answer that question is speed. I think, especially since I started my career 15 years ago and technology was already accelerating, social media was already a big thing. TikTok hadn't exploded yet. Obviously that came more recently, but I think technology's always moved fast. But what I can say, especially now as I'm pivoting a bit in my career to more AI focused strategies and less, broader marketing, I'm realizing that it's just everything is moving faster than you could have imagined, right? And especially more recently with the growth and acceleration of AI, I feel like I'm trying to, every day or at least a couple times a week, I try to learn AI, new tricks, new skills, but I don't feel like I'm able to catch up, and I'm more in it than most people, right?
Yeah.
So I can't imagine how others feel, right? So I empathize definitely because I'm kind of there in the middle. But what's changed is just the dramatic pace at which things are moving, and they're moving fast. And I think to a lot of people, Isabel, I think to a lot of people that it's like it turns people off, and it gets people more less wanting to try things. And I think I've learned to have this mindset shift, and it's a little bit of about your mindset and your perception, right? And I think if you see the fastness of the pace of AI change and how it's changing every industry, not just marketing, if you just accept it and understand it and just kind of run with it, I think the more you'll be able to kind of understand the goodness that AI brings, and you'll be able to kind of adopt and use faster instead of just kind of always resisting it, no? Because that is the natural human nature and tendency to see the fastness, all these crazy changes, new GPT models, new perplexities, new, nano banana studios. And you're just like, it's just too much. It's overwhelming. It completely is. Again, I'm in it a lot more than most, and I find it overwhelming. But once you kind of have this mindset shift of, hey, it's a good thing. There's a lot of progress and transformation that's going to happen on the positive side of the AI. Let me lean into it instead of resisting it. I think the better you'll come out.
Oh, I love that perspective. It's a very calming. It calms me a lot because it like you said, it is very scary and overwhelming, and every week something new comes up. And I don't know if you heard of that article that sort of viralized a couple months ago uh, about AI and just how it will just continue to sort of update itself and just in this like chain. So yeah, it's definitely overwhelming and scary, but change is part of life. It's an inevitability. So I love that your take on having a positive perspective towards it, because I feel like the power of perspective is invaluable, and especially in these moments, that uncertain moments.
Well, and I think a lot of the times, to add more, people really get focused on the tool, and I think a lot of companies right now are quickly trying to figure out like which tool's best, or let's try this, or why is this one better than the other one, and let's compare. And each has their pros and cons, and especially from a more management perspective, I'll add that what we can't forget as managers is that it's less about the tool and more about the people side of change, right? And there's a lot of change management leadership and thought leadership that I've obviously had to accelerate my learning on as I help lead teams of through this big change and transformation that is AI, that it's, don't forget that a lot of the times, it's not necessarily about the tool. It's more so majority about how do you manage the people that are going through the change, right? And how do you get ahead of the change? How do you empathize with them? Like I just did with you. Hey, it's hard. It's a lot, right? Like you have to do a lot of the more fundamental human things to start with. And I think that if you take time at the beginning, even with all this craziness and all these AI changes and new headlines and all this stuff going on out there, the more you just kind of focus on the people side, on, hey, we're in this change together, let's figure out together. I think that helps for people to kind of normalize AI and, view it as a good thing instead of being intimidated by it.
Yeah. And adding to that, what you just mentioned of the people side of it all. When you first started driving AI adoption internally, what was that actual reaction from teams like? What did that look like?
What's interesting about that is that, I came into it, again, it's more of a me thing and my mind shift and perspective, but I came into it very like, hey, everyone's going to love AI and everyone's going to want to use it to do their job better and to do it more efficiently, to maybe have more time for vacation, right? Or leave earlier, or allow more time for brainstorming or critical thinking and strategizing, right? But yeah, I quickly learned that that's not the case. I think, everyone's different, and everyone's also on different AI learning journeys, so everyone's at different stages. But yeah, I quickly had to realize that you have to, and much like marketing principles apply, you have to kind of think about your audience, think who who you're talking to, try to put yourselves in their shoes, and then quickly try to talk to them in a way that is more applicable to them and that they're more comfortable with, right? But yeah, early on I was in workshops, in hallways, bragging about AI and talking about the goalness, and I got a lot of people saying, hey, I'm not that comfortable yet, or hey, I'm not there yet, like tone it down a little bit. So I had to tone it down, and it's maybe not necessarily about toning it down, it's just more about knowing how to speak to it and what things to talk about, just to kind of reframe the narrative a little bit and adjust, so that you're being aware of who you're talking to, so that once you adjust and you take into consideration how they might be feeling, because maybe you're also talking to a very technical group, right, who's already doing vibe coding and some really cool stuff. Well, of course, they've already embraced AI. They already went through this many moons ago. So to them, I can come in all high energetic and let's adopt AI, let's use AI. But to other audiences that are maybe not as tech forward, or dealing with the change a little bit more behind, not that they are behind, you just have to kind of talk to them in different ways and just kind of meet their needs and just take it at a different pace.
Yeah, so it's sort of like guiding someone's thinking, around AI, like not how to use it, but how to think about it.
Yep. And I'll even add to that. I think it's a matter of also realizing there's some fundamentals and basics that you have to try to comprehend and understand before you even jump to some of the more advanced stuff, right? Like I think
Yeah.
another thing I'm seeing a trend or happening is a lot of people want to jump into agentic AI, or like building agents and coordinating agents, and that is a lot of what's happening in the more advanced sectors of AI, and it is a super encouraging thing, and if anything more intimidating for a lot of people. But even those people that come at me and when we try to have conversations about, oh, I want to do agent stuff and agentic stuff, it's like, well, wait, let's take a step back, let's make sure we've covered the fundamentals. Let's discuss first, like make sure there's a foundation of understanding of how AI works, of how large language models work, context engineering, not just prompt engineering. And then once you get to start talking a little bit about agentic AI, before you're even building anything, let's talk about how agentic AI workflows work, right?
Yeah.
How you start and end a workflow, how you connect agents together, and how you have certain tools and tasks that you can assign to have them coordinate. So there's a lot of critical thinking essentially, and a lot of understanding of basics before you're actually building anything. But the more exciting part, and I've been there, is, oh, I want to build an agent. It's like, well, wait, first understand the basics. And I've heard this perspective, oh, well, you and I'm a little bit like this, oh, I learn by doing, and that's fine too. And then maybe there's certain environments or sandboxes where you can kind of play with things that before you break anything, right? But I still encourage, like, it's like going to school, right? For anything, for any subject or matter, like you gotta like first try to read a little bit, understand a little bit, get ready to test, but do a run through of the basics, especially so when you start building and you start hitting some roadblocks, you kind of go back and be like, oh, so that's what they meant by that, or that's why I've got to do this before I do this other step because it's
Yeah.
sequential. So not to get into too into it, but as you can tell, I get very passionate about teaching AI. But yeah, I think you gotta first hold your horses and ask around and figure things out a little bit and just sit with the information a little before anyone starts building anything, because then that's when things can potentially break, or you have a bad experience with AI and have a bad prompt and or a weaker prompt or weaker output. I'm sorry, and you're like, oh well, this isn't that great as it's hyped up to be. So understanding first and then application. Yep.
And I'm curious, was there a specific type of team or role that was harder to get on board with AI?
I think it depends, really, and this is more controversial, but a lot of people think it's also an age thing. I wouldn't necessarily. I've seen plenty of cases where people 30 years in their career, so double my time, especially at in some corners of different companies that are more legacy companies, right? I've seen some pretty impressive things from people who have been longer in their careers, who went through the advent of the internet, right, or even older technological advances, where they're doing some pretty impressive stuff because, again, back to how we started with that mindset
Yeah.
shift. I think they realized early, okay, I got to stay relevant in this workforce. Yes, this is another big change, but I'm not going to disregard it. I'm going to jump on it. I'm going to personally learn. I'm going to personally set aside 1 hour every Friday, because maybe Fridays are a little bit more calm, to like learn AI, to try a new thing, to understand the AI concept, and then I'll practice it. And I think, again, they might be more on the older side of their career, but they're learning it and embracing it and showing me things, and that's great, right? So it's not necessarily about age. It's not necessarily. It's more about the mindset piece, the appetite for it, right? But yeah, it really varies. There's all types of people who also even on. But what I will say is, on the younger side, a lot of people are just more coming into the workforce already with AI kind of in their blood and in their DNA. And that's a good thing, right? In that, they've already gone through schooling potentially with AI as a tool, and already know the tools very well, which is great. Because then when they come into like a corporate environment, there's going to be some limitations and some guidelines, but coming into work already having a foundational understanding of not only how AI works, but how to use it, then that makes you, potentially more of a productive employee. And that's a great thing for corporations.
That's interesting. I feel like this just sort of took me back to my high school years where, they try to like introduce you to Excel, and this is gonna, be so useful when you go to university and work. But now it's AI, which is crazy, how times change.
Well, and I think times change, but what one of the things that I love about this concept of AI in general is that we don't realize it as much, but we've kind of already been preparing ourselves for how to use AI in certain extents. Like the great example I love to give in workshops is, think about how we Google, right?
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've seen the numbers of how people are less going to Google and Google searching, right, and more using AI as a starting point to find an answer to something. But it took a lot of us, not even outside of corporate life, just in our personal lives, to understand like how important it is to give Google context in order to get a better result, right? Now it's easier where you can just say, hey, best pizza places around, and for
Yeah.
mapping it's easy, right? But for more intricate searches, or if you're really trying to find something or buy something on Amazon, like we've all learned the importance of, all right, whatever I type in that search bar, I've got to make it very focused and very detailed, or else what I'm going to get is not that great, right? And that's
Yeah.
just for queries in general, but Google searching, right, which we've all been doing for many, many years now. Well,
Yeah.
those same principles apply to an AI prompt, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I have to kind of bring it back to that, because people will be looking at a AI GPT and be kind of like stuck and like, well, I don't know what to tell it. It's like, well, ask yourself, what do you need? What are you trying to look for? Go through this quick little process of trying to get to see where you need to go. And just like you thought of that quickly and trying to find, a cool pizza place close by. Similarly, just think, okay, I'm in the need of this. Let me put it into the GPT and then see what it says. And then, be surprised by the output, just like how many years ago we were surprised when we Googled something and it came back with something that we were like, oh yeah, this is exactly what I need. Same concept applied now just to AI. So just in a different way, but you can almost equate it to now using AI and prompting, for example. It's like a basic skill that everyone just kind of already had, but now we just need to refine it. No one's ever going to be the perfect prompter, but the more you understand it's about prompting is a skill that you can refine, then the more you can educate yourself on it, understand better prompts. I love seeing examples, by the way, because I'm not the AI expert either, but I love others sharing me their prompts and be like, oh, look what I tried. Right, Jorge? Or like, hey, have you prompted the AI to do this? And like try it. And then of course I'll be like, well, yeah, let me see what it does. And then seeing the results and then comparing results, like not to geek out too much, but that's an example of people, there's good knowledge sharing, especially between peers or where they're showing what they did. And then you kind of get this aha moment of, oh, wow, I didn't know I could prompt for that. And I can use that to, make my job a little bit easier. Right. And I think all that knowledge sharing is great. And a lot of it starts with just basic prompting and just knowing that the better you put into something, into a prompt, the better the output.
That's interesting. And when you started running AI workshops with marketing teams and cross-functional teams, what did you think would work when teaching AI that didn't?
So I'll be 100% transparent. I think a lot of the times we didn't know what was going to work, and we were just kind of testing things,
Yeah.
piloting things, and see what would stick, right? Because that's another thing we all have to go back to, and it's already mentioned in terms of just trying to empathize and putting ourselves in people's shoes, is that this AI trend and this acceleration of AI usage is still relatively new, right?
Yeah.
Like I think while it does feel, you agreed earlier, right? Like, oh, it's a lot and it's just, it's a little extra stress. Like, I think we also just need to acknowledge that while it's a big change and we should lean into it, like already stated, I think it's also super important to say, hey, we're all kind of in the early stages of this, right? And we're all in it together, right? At the same time, while in different, steps in the journey. I think it's super important to say, hey, ChatGPT barely exploded in 2023, right? So we're not even, we're of course getting into the 3-year mark, but the point there is that, just like social media took many, many years for Facebook to take off, for Twitter, for Instagram, and later TikTok, right? As marketers, it's kind of easy to understand in a continuum of time using social media as an example, where, hey, we're barely in the early stages, right? I joked the other day with the marketing workshop about using AI, where it's like we're barely in the stage when Facebook you had to have a .edu, right? Like you couldn't, like, not your grandma and your tia from back home couldn't access it yet, just because Facebook was still so small and it wasn't global yet. Like, it almost feels like we're in those early stages, right?
Yeah,
And I think
definitely.
that's why it's great that if you're listening to this, or if you've been thinking about AI or for AI for a while and you haven't really tried it, like, maybe this will push you to be like, okay, I'm not that behind, I want to get on now before the train really leaves, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the important thing too, is realizing it's been a short journey, so, and we're all on it, it hasn't been that long.
Absolutely. And you have mentioned AI ambassadors.
Yes.
Can you walk us through how that works?
Yes. So one of the things that I think is important, fundamental in enabling broad scale change, right? I'm talking like, big companies, thousands of employees, is you essentially change management principles kind of dictate that you need your own, small network of army volunteers, as I call them, or to equate it to marketing terms, because again, this is probably more suited. This interview is more for marketing folks per se, or marketing media folks. Is that it's almost like you need your own influencers, right? And that sometimes means internal, right? You need and I use that term again, referencing social media influencers, right? It's like almost you need that type of same perspective and at least model for internal changes, which you need, certain people kind of spread in within, in a large organization, and again, who maybe represent finance and represent supply chain, right? And represent marketing to sales. And then you handpick these people as they probably raised their hands and demonstrated that, they're not necessarily subject matter experts, but they're more interested in AI than others, right? And they've been already doing some things and learning on their own proactively. So how do you grab those and make them your influencers, right? And we're not necessarily paying them for any social media posts per se internally, but there is, definitely a good relationship there of, okay, let us use you as a communication channel, as
Yeah.
a vehicle to get more people in your organization involved, right? Because there are certain corners of large organizations that you can't reach without the help of people embedded in those small business units or larger business units, right? And then they can have their own ambassadors, right? And then you've kind of created this network of and layers of ambassadors or champions or back to influencers, right? Who kind of help. And little by little, you're educating them, you're telling them the latest and greatest of tools, and then they're kind of, sharing that information as well. And then you kind of have this replication and this amplification of information, which is at the end of the day with AI, that's the most important thing, is sharing information without it being too much, right? But the more I can use these ambassadors or champions or influencers to share information, then the more broadly we can move the broad organizations to more change.
That's a great technique. And you are like clearly very passionate and very wise regarding all things AI. So I'm curious, in your opinion, where do you see people over trusting AI in ways that, can concern you?
Well, and before I answer that, let me comment on the wise thing, because I've had to dispel a lot of myths and rumors and say, hey, I am also not the expert in AI. I have to learn it as well. And while I know maybe a little bit more because I'm in it more than regularly, I am not the AI, expert on all things. Because I like to clarify that, because I am constantly, I will say probably on a weekly basis, humbled by someone else who is doing AI, in a more advanced way,
Yeah.
and they're teaching. Right. So it's almost like I have to learn it too, like I said, and there's out there who are way more experts and way more wise than me. So just wanted to kind of add that piece just to really, really make it clear. I don't pretend to be the most upmost expert on AI. But to your question, and remind me, it was on the lanes of what again?
The people, where do you see people over trusting AI?
We're trusting, yes, because I did have an example. I think it's hard not to talk about trust without mentioning OpenClaw or CloudBot. If you all ever saw on the news how it kind of agents kind of created their own little Reddit threads and their own worlds, and kind of were doing a lot of autonomous action on their own, and it scared a lot of people, right? And I think you know what is so important about AI, and we use this a lot in my current role and in other roles, is we talk a lot about always having human in the loop. And I think that's why it's important that people think autonomous action from agents is really cool, in the sense of, oh, I can go set this agent to do some work for me while I go get my coffee, right? Or I'm gonna go to sleep and have AI create a business plan for me and do outreach for me for marketing. And it's like, well, there's you have to set up certain human gates to make sure that the AI is coming back to you, keeping you in the loop or on the loop, so that you're informed and that it's not going rogue and creating stuff that you didn't want it to create, or breaking things, or going a little too much, right? And I think that's why there's always that caution that we like to say, right? But I think another clarification is, well, a lot of people think autonomous agents is a great thing because it's going to really help you do a lot of things faster. I mean, if you want that level of autonomy, you're going to have to kind of like grant it access to a lot of things. And that's where we always kind of err on the side of, well, we'll consider that, right? Like, consider how much access you're giving the AI, because there's still a lot of goodness and great things that AI can do without giving it full autonomous, insights and authority to your devices, right? I think we all agree our phones are like holy grail. We all hold them close to our chest, right? So I would caution, especially with your phone, watch how much, you give it authority, agents, right? Or AIs to do, right? If you're on a personal device or if you're on a work device, I'm sure there's a compliance or security team who's measuring to make sure, you don't give AI too much power. But especially on personal computers, maybe you can play around a little bit more. But on phone devices or on work devices, I think there's a lot of controls precisely for that, so that AI doesn't take it and, build something for you or misrepresent you in a certain way.
Yeah. I had a guest that mentioned that we are the chefs and AI is the sous chef, you know?
Yep. Yeah.
And
or we like to say here, especially from where we are now in the earlier stages of AI, it's your personal productivity assistant, right? So just think of it
Yeah.
in as many ways as you can as you are going in your corporate day, right? Like, where can I embed AI? Oh, can it recap this? Oh, hey, can it summarize this email? Or hey, can it, draft something for me? Like, it's in people will be shocked if they were to continue the day and say, oh wait, maybe I should use AI for this, right? And I think the more you ask yourself where AI can, be applied, the more you'll see how valuable and sometimes how non-valuable it can be, right? There
Yeah.
are some instances where AI might not work, and that's fine. But I would counter as a AI believer now that AI can help in a lot of things, in the majority of things, and even in things you wouldn't expect, like brainstorming, right? Because it's such a technical thing, and it's such a,
Yeah.
yes, in the world of coding, there's a lot of AI use, and even with the Gentic AI, you're not thinking creativity. But as a marketer, I've been mind blown at like playing with AI, and like I have this initial idea and then I feed it into it and I say, hey, refine it, and then it spits something else, and then it gives me the second option, and I'm like, wait, I didn't think about it this way, and then I grab that and then I build on that, and then I compare it to a second AI, and then now I've got like different perspectives, and then all through this whole journey that I'm going on and on about, but this whole journey, right? And it's never linear and it's all over the place, but then all of a sudden what was my little idea over here ended up, morphing into something really cool and in a different way, but then more valuable to the organization. And that's all through the brainstorm cycle where I was using AI to help me, poke holes in this and then refine that. And then the output ended up being not what I expected, but a lot better for the company.
That's insanely cool. And are there any brands right now that you think are doing really interesting job with AI?
Uh, that's hard to comment on like broad AI, but I of course am very focused in because it's in my heart. Marketing is in my heart to look at what brands are doing AI well, right? Because I think a lot of brands are starting to play with it, and it can get tricky, right?
Yeah.
And it's also hard to be that early adopter or that first brand to really try things. But I have close ties connections to Coca Cola, being so that my dad used to work for Coca Cola, so
Oh, cool.
we growing up, that's what the only thing we could drink, and we even had Coca Cola plates and silverware at home. So obviously, very very close to the polar bears and Santa through the eyes of Coca Cola. And I think that's an example of a brand that I know has already done some commercials in mass perspective, right? I don't know if to the level of Super Bowl, but definitely in a lot of instances they've I know for the holidays they were vocal about it. They got a lot of press about it, saying, "Hey, this Christmas commercial for Coca Cola was made by AI," right? Because of course they have to caveat it, right?
Yeah.
But that opens up a whole lot of world of opportunities of like, okay, well, if you've got this massive soft drink global, right? And they're using AI, they're trying it. I think that does set the tone for other brands to try it, and I'm sure there's a couple of brands that have maybe smaller that have tried and failed, but you learn and then you try it again,
Yeah.
right? But as long as you're open to people and saying, hey, we're trying this, and even acknowledging if it doesn't work, right? There are brands, and Coca-Cola, I'm sure, has had this in their history where maybe something, not necessarily AI, but where they tried something and it didn't work. Well, let's have that same grace with AI, or maybe Coca-Cola or other big brands. If they try something with AI and it doesn't work, well, hey, I would be on that camp of more supporting them and giving them the thumbs up for trying versus maybe those bigger brands that are more on the shy side and don't want to try and are waiting for others to fail. But then you're going to lose out, right? And then the earlier you are to trying things, the better you'll come out.
And we always like to close with this question because we are aware about the importance of or the power that a mentor can have on one's journey. So like who is one or two people in your life who have like left a mark on your professional journey?
There's a mentor of mine here through my graduate experience at Southern Methodist University in Dallas, where coincidentally met him post graduation, and then happened to realize that he was actually doing some training and some development programs for the company that I currently work for, AT&T. And it was interesting because he was probably more than 3 years ago already pushing AI, and I remember sitting in some of his sessions. He wrote a couple books on it. He was talking about prompting, and I'll be honest. I'll tell this to him in the face. Like, I kind of ignored it, and I was like, yeah, I don't know what this thing is, right? Like, I'll get to it. I'll get to it. And I kind of, not literally, but like, conceptually, I bookmarked, all right, I got to figure out AI, but, I'm not going to necessarily pay too much attention to him yet. Then, of course, AI explodes. Corporate
Crazy.
world starts to use AI more. I realize, oh wow, maybe I should have listened to him more, right? And now he's a voice, and that I think about him constantly when I'm working on AI initiatives, and I'll pick his brain occasionally. His name is Dr. Jose Bowen, and in the sense of like, because now I realize he was on the forefront before AI was a big thing. Like, I'm sure he's already thinking about what else is coming with AI. How can I maybe have him guide me and give me direction as I kind of go on my journey? So that's a funny story of I didn't originally want to listen to him, and now I'm all ears to whatever he's got to say about AI. I will.
Oh my God, I love that. Well, Jorge, thank you so much for taking the time to join me today. I know you must be incredibly busy, so thank you so much for taking a minute of your, I'm sure is a very busy day, to come and share some insights. There's a lot I feel like that we can all learn from how different teams are navigating this. So I really appreciate you sharing your perspective.
Yeah, again, if it was about marketing and AI, which we covered both, I think in many ways and many examples, yeah, happy to be here. And I'll say that, to end it on a high note, AI is a very, could be intimidating, but it's a very valuable thing, right? And it can handle what I like to say. And I heard in some podcasts, which I should give it credit to, but forget who said it. Like, AI will take care of the ordinary so that we can have more time for the extraordinary. So I heard that once, and I had to like stop at a red light and like write that down, because I'm like, this is really good. And now I kind of keep that close to heart of like, hey, that's a perfect way to summarize AI, is that it can take care of some of the more mundane, some of the more tedious stuff, so that we have more time to do some extraordinary work. So I hope that speaks to anyone listening, and that people will embrace AI.
I love that. I'm taking that with me. That quote. Very cool.
You've been listening to Fully Managed, brought to you by Penji. Check out the show notes to learn more about today's guest, and to learn more about Penji, the human-first creative subscription service, head over to penji.co. And by the way, if you're still listening, it would mean the absolute world to us if you were to share this podcast with a friend, and of course, subscribe.